Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 17 of the Future of Work show, the show where we discuss ideas that we think have relevance for our futures. Now, for those of you who've been following us, we've been doing this series from June, most weeks, and each week we invite a guest who has a unique perspective to offer on what might be some of the skills that all of us need to develop for the future. For today's episode, actually, we have a topic that's extremely interesting. And it's extremely interesting because till a few months ago, I hadn't quite understood or even begun to think of what might be the possible connection between business improv and leadership. And on the show today, I have with me Bob Kulhan, who is really an expert in this field. I'm just bringing him on. Hi, Bob.
Hi,
Thank you so much for joining us today.
thanks, you, Shalini. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I've enjoyed all of our conversations, so I'm all yours. Let's talk.
Thank you. So let me tell you a little bit about Bob. Now, Bob has been doing business improv for over 20 years. Now, he's a much in demand speaker, teacher across the world and across all top business schools in the US. I know that you teach at UCLA. You had a program at UCLA, by the way, when I was there, but we didn't actually get to meet at that time. So it's so interesting how things work out.
And Wharton as well, right?
Yeah, true. But you also teach at Duke, Columbia, and I know that you're teaching a program tomorrow at Wharton. So I feel so privileged that you could join us for this conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is an honor, and the privilege is all mine. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that from you. We'll be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks, Bob. So let me start by asking you a question that's actually been on my mind since I read your book and since we spoke a couple of times. How did you get interested in improv in the first place? I know that you mentioned that you grew up in a non-urban area. So how did improv even enter your life?
Wow. Okay. So the shortest version of this story that I could tell is in high school when everybody had the talent show and the band would come on and play and the curtain would go down and then the band would leave and the cheerleaders would come out and do their routine. I noticed that there was a blank stage and that would last several minutes because it would take time to break down the drums and all that stuff and create open area. So by the time I was in my second year of high school, I just asked if I could take that time in between the real acts and just use that time and just make things up and goof off with the audience. And they said, much to my surprise, yes. And then I did that for 3 of those 4 years and only came to find out later that was called improv. And once I started learning improv, it was skin. It was just part of my blood. I knew that this is why, I was put on this earth to do improvisation. And so I picked it up formally once I was in my final years of university getting my business degree, and then we're off and running.
Wow, was that scary to take on the blank stage in between? Sorry, out of curiosity.
No, even at high school, I was maybe 16, 17 years old the first time I did that, and I didn't know it was a real art form or anything like that. I just make it up, make people laugh is what we called it. And no, it was exciting. It was awesome because it's the unknown and it's unpredictable, and also because that you don't know how the audience is going to react, and so they could hate you in an instant. That was exciting, not because I was such a well-liked guy in the first place. It was just more of that opportunity to explore and discover and even invent in real time. And the risk that was associated with that, just got the blood pumping. And how to do that with structure and learn actually how to perform, then that was a different game altogether.
And it doesn't take a long time to learn the basic skills of improv?
Well, it depends on how you want to apply them. If you want to be a comedic improviser, a theatrical improviser, someone who performs in front of an audience, it should take at least a year to get the foundational stuff in place, let alone begin the path to mastery. To learn to apply it, though, in other forms and functions, like, for example, in business, you can get foundational blocks in just a handful of hours if it's presented correctly and it's on point with the outcome.
Wow. When I read your book, and I'm going to pick up a quote that I really like because I wanted to ask you about it. So, right at the start of your book, you say grassroots efforts are real.
Yeah.
Grass cannot grow if someone is standing on it. Where are you standing? I thought I would ask you what this meant to you.
Well, so I was hearing quite often in the first 10, 15 years of being an entrepreneur, running my own company, going into businesses, working with great business people, great leaders, that the organization won't allow this. And, this has got to come, this movement has to come from will and intrinsic motivation and grassroots, in other words. It's got to be the swell of the people that's going to make this happen. And I was like, that's dismissive. It dismisses where you are as a leader and your power, your influence on other people. And so it just started organically coming that if like, all right, you want this grass movement to take place, it's real. Are you standing on the grass? Because as a leader, you've got to, if you want that to take place, you've got to create a culture that allows that. You have to create some organizational structure that allows great minds, great people, and motivated people to take advantage of opportunity in real time. And, I think that's actually very appropriate now, today, that this is that time of so much unknown and so much ambiguity and unpredictability. It's the opportunity because we've never done this before. And we don't know exactly where we're going to go as a people together, to allow people organizationally the opportunity to thrive, the opportunity to discover and explore and invent and, really create the new normal as it's being called. We're not there yet. We're not even close to being near a new normal. And so, giving people that opportunity to have ownership of not only their future, of an organization's future, is, I think, a wonderful and powerful opportunity for a leader to help guide.
Well, that's so lovely. So when I read it, I was actually curious, and I thought it was really, really interesting because I haven't heard this quote anywhere else, and I read quite a bit. So I thought it was a really interesting way to preface your book because that's what it seems to be all about. As a leader or as a professional, how do you create the space for yourself and for others so that you can be what you call your what's the called the performing at the top of your intelligence. Another phrase I absolutely loved.
Yeah, well, thank you for the grassroots one. To my knowledge, I haven't heard or seen that anywhere either. So that, who knows if it's ever been said before in the history of the world. I might have been the first to put it on paper, though. Maybe, who knows?
Nice.
The top of your intelligence actually is an improv phrase. So that's been around for a long time. And that typically relates to what is known in comedy as blue comedy. I don't know if that's an international phrase.
Actually, I'm just going to stop you there and ask you to explain, business improv to us, because I think most of us are familiar with shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway, where we just watch in awe of the hugely talented performers and look at them and think, okay, they're just naturals. So we couldn't possibly be doing anything like that. And even if we did, it's hard to see how that would connect with anything we do in the rest of our lives. So
Sure.
maybe you can start by just explaining what business improv is in the first place.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's use Whose Line Is It Anyway as our base, okay? Because that is such a popular show and the performers are excellent. They're fantastic improvisers. So that is improvisation with the outcome of comedy, or that's the endeavor, right? Make people laugh, entertain people. And that's a specific form of improvisation. Yet you could, and I would extend this to you, do special forces need to improvise? Do chefs need to improvise? Do sports teams need to improvise? Do you need to improvise right now? And so the answer to all those is yes. Yes, everybody's using this skill set. It's the outcomes that make it different. So now as we apply it to business improv, we break the definition of improvisation down into 3 core competencies. And this is unique to business improv as well. Those core competencies are reacting, adapting, and communicating. So reacting is focus and concentration and presence in real time at a very, very high level. This is in the moment, and this is performing at the top of your intelligence, which we can circle back around to. Adapting is if you're reacting within parameters or trying to achieve a specific outcome, like in a strategy, for example, in a collaboration, in a sales conversation, you're reacting and adapting. You know where you want to get ultimately. However, you're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to make some adjustments. You're going to have to negotiate and navigate a situation to get to that outcome. The third subroute to both of those other two is communicating. We're not in space. We're not in a vacuum. There's always someone with whom we can react and adapt, or something in our environment to which we're forced to react and adapt right now. So now when you look at these three core competencies, the question then isn't really, do you use them? Do you need to react, adapt, communicate, i.e. improvise? That's the answer. The question really is, who starts training in this? Because that's where it is. So when you look at those whose lines it anyway folk, these elite performers, they've been doing this a long, long time. And it's based in training. It's based in education. It's based in knowledge. It's based in getting repetition in. And I always equate what we do to riding a bicycle. What's the best way to learn how to ride a bicycle?
Get on it.
Get on it. That's it. That's the same. There are people, of course, like there are great musicians, great athletes, great mathematicians who are just gifted in this, right? There's just some kind of magic quality of like, ooh, you are magical. However, it is a learned skill set. And anybody who's elite at it has practiced that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. They've put themselves through the ringer. They failed often, early and often, many, many, many times, because of everything we mentioned before. It's unpredictable. It's unknown. It's uncontrollable sometimes, especially if you don't know how or what you're doing. Now, that said, as you reduce it down to this skill set of reacting, adapting, communicating, if you really focus on that, then that's actually a great way to get people to perform at the top of their intelligence. Because what that really means as it applies to business is using everything that you can in real time, in that moment, as you're reacting and adapting and talking to each other, communicating with each other. So the ability to access material that's locked in your brain, old books you read, references, experiences that you've had with other people, linking intelligence, IQ to EQ, emotional intelligence, and saying, okay, something, your spidey senses are going off, like, what's not going on here? What's going on? You look angry. Am I angry? Measuring your own trigger responses. So it's the ability then to take everything that you can to the very best of your ability in real time and relax into it. And then just let your natural intelligence come to the surface. So you're not really thinking so hard on what to do or what to do correctly. You're just saying, we're going to live in this moment and we're going to get the best out of each other right now. And from this, we're going to pan for gold, find the real nuggets of gold and move forward.
Bob, this is so interesting because I think through the training of a lot of people, certainly mine, we develop a lot of skills in the preparation part. The research, the thinking of what you're going to say, preparing for a presentation, a talk, a meeting, etc., etc. To be honest, till we spoke, I hadn't ever realized that even responding in the moment, as you said, the observe, adapt, communicate, is a skill that can be practiced. I just assumed that people were either born with it or perhaps not. So it's really interesting to hear you say that these are in fact skills that people can practice and use to help their training come out in the most appropriate way in that particular circumstance. I think that's what I hear you speak about.
Absolutely. So if you take all of so what we also say, and you probably read this in the book as well, is that improvisation thrives at that pivotal moment when planning and strategy meets execution. Right there. Planning and strategy, execution. At that moment, you're going to watch people improvise really well or fail at improvisation to make that strategy work and to make the plans come together, etc. And going back to your point, as it relates to reacting, adapting, and then the subroute communication and collaboration are inherent challenges in people. It's inherent challenges in group. And then once you start adding this medium into the mix as well, it becomes even harder because everyone's operating as entrepreneurs and pulled by children being homeschooled and dogs barking, the home life and the schedule without being able to rub off on each other. So that need to communicate clearly, and even adaptive communication, adaptive storytelling, changing in real time, pivoting or adjusting in real time, being agile to make sure your point is across, is a skill set everybody needs to focus on. Because if you cannot articulate your thoughts, your vision, your mission, your goals, and bring people along with you, are you really a leader? Maybe by rank, maybe by title. However, leaders lead people for the most part. So everybody can get stronger at that, even the best. And that's true for improvisers as well. The best improvisers don't stop performing, because if you stop performing, then like any other muscle, the brain will atrophy as it relates to this specific skill set.
That's really interesting, Bob. It's really interesting. And frankly, it's of interest to me personally as well, because I think after our conversations and after reading your book, I put that on my to-do list as something, a new suite of skills to get better at, just responding in the moment to whatever comes up. And, not just in the more life skills context, but in a business context. I found that really helpful. One of the things, Bob, you speak about in your book is how business improv becomes more and more relevant for the way the future is emerging now. And obviously, this is the Future of Work show. We're really interested in understanding how we can develop skills that will, help us from here on. Could you speak a little bit to what you mean by business improv becoming so helpful in being a leader or team member from here on?
Yes. So I think, Shalini, the thing to qualify is the book came out in 2017, and I think it's still relevant, that what you just said right now, because the further we pull apart from each other, the more isolated that we feel and become, the more important these people skills are, and these connection skills, these human skills, human communication skills. It's a basic human desire to be understood, or at least believe that somebody understands us, right? That's the core of all great relationships, all great friendships. And so to focus on how to do that specifically through mediums like this, and when we're feeling isolated and things like morale and energy are getting a little lower, it's the meeting of the minds. It's the bringing a team together and unleashing potential, unleashing human power to find the best ideas, period. It's when you pull people together and everyone's focused on each other, everyone's focused on that common purpose, that mission, and everyone is completely aligned on what we're doing, then what we find is that the collective consciousness of the team is going to outweigh that of any individual at any time. And it's the focus that people have is intrinsically motivated to participate, because they feel their contribution is being heard. They feel valued for doing it. They feel valuable inside the team. And all this then turns into a positive cycle that's like, okay, I want to participate inside this team because I feel like I'm bringing value to this team and I'm building into something greater than myself. And now is that great time, because as tiptoed upon before, the future is even more unknown than it was in 2017. And the way that we will get through this is by having smart people continue to talk to each other and us figuring out how to get through this together. And that is the future of learning. That is the future of people. That is our future.
Bob, you just spoke about the additional challenges of the fact that, most of us are interacting virtually now, and most team meetings are virtual team meetings. I know you lead all your workshops virtually now. So what is it that a leader can do to make a team meeting, for instance, that much more effective, using principles from, the work you do in a virtual setting?
So business improv actually started going virtual 10 years ago. And we started executing our first virtual programs just shy of 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago. So this is right inside of our wheelhouse. On top of that, business improv has always been virtual. This is my home office. We have a team in New York, Chicago, LA, and North Carolina. So everything that we focus on and help people do is related to connecting based through our experience, both internally as a team and externally with clients and key stakeholders. And so first thing I would say is develop a plan, put a strategy in place, and a really honest one as well. As a planner, I think you'll appreciate, like, know the strengths and weaknesses of your team, know your strengths and weaknesses in this reality, focus on where people are, talk to people, use this same concept that we were just talking about with, the collective intelligence of the group coming together, and ask people what's the best way to move forward collectively as a team, and use that as a collaborative model to put a plan in place. And then I would say, in that spirit of improv, adjust, adapt, improvise, because no matter what plan you put in place, especially now, if it's truly unknown and truly uncomfortable, then you're going to hit a lot of speed bumps and a lot of divots in the road, the unexpected holes, sinkholes that are going to pop up. So then it's a matter of adjusting and pivoting. So I would say cling to yes and through all of that, as that's the thread to postpone judgment. That's the thread to stay present in the moment. That's the thread to really listen and connect with each other.
So would you mind sharing the principles you speak about in the book, the fundamental principles of improv? I know you just touched on a couple of them, but things like postponing judgment and the others.
Sure.
So that we can all learn from that.
Sure, absolutely. So yes and is the cornerstone of improvisation around the world. Now, yes and has a bit of a negative connotation for a lot of people, because when they hear the word yes, that means that agreement for most people. Like, I'm agreeing to what you're saying, and that means I have to help only you by supporting you and building directly upon it. And that's really not what yes and means, at least for business improv. More than agreement, excuse me. Yes is I hear you. Yes is I accept that you're talking to me. Yes is I'm really doing the best I can to understand you on your terms. That's what yes is. And is the bridge to how you understand it. And is the bridge to your mind, your background, your education, your drive, your passion, your authenticity. So more than anything, then, yes becomes thoughtfulness. Yes is you have my undivided attention right now, regardless of proximity to each other, regardless of the medium we're going to use, its focus, its concentration, its presence in real time. And is the bridge to how you're focused, how you're present, how you're concentrating, how you are in the moment. So when you hear things through these mediums of I'm having trouble with engagement, I'm having trouble with presence, this is a great way to drive that. Drive presence, drive engagement in the moment. Because through this great two-word phrase, you slow the brain down. You're focused and you're present. You're here right now. You're not thinking about where you're going to go next, because you cannot yes and somebody without actually understanding them. The and becomes irrelevant if you didn't actually understand what they're saying. That's dangerous. You can undermine what you're doing. So clinging to yes and is also a way to postpone judgment. And postponing judgment is different than abandoning judgment. Postponing judgment is saying, as a thoughtful, intentional leader, I'm going to deliberately defer judgment to another time. I'm not going to abandon it. I'm going to just push it off to another time. And normally, as I start breaking this down, we look at divergent thinking and convergent thinking. And in that divergent arena, yes and is that opportunity to create a psychologically safe space for people. An opportunity for people to communicate fearlessly and boldly and not worry about repercussions for saying something that is not necessarily on point or relevant to the conversation, or is just so far out there that they could feel like they're stupid or they're going to get in trouble for saying this thing. So you create this nice environment using yes and just to have people openly talk with each other. And then you save that convergent side for the editing, the fine tuning, the questioning, the sorting, the judgment. So on the divergent side, you're postponing judgment. On the convergent side, you put the critical thinking skills back in place. And that's super important, because you can actually use yes and on both sides to help reinforce that psychologically safe space in which people are just not afraid to talk to each other.
You know what I love about this, Bob? One, more and more organization research is showing that psychological safety is pretty much the foundation for any kind of true innovative thinking. So we know that. We know that from a lot of research and a lot of practical experience as well. I mean, we've all been in meetings where we felt perhaps a little hesitant to speak because we didn't feel the environment was safe enough. And the responsibility of creating experiences where our team members feel comfortable speaking up is obviously squarely the leaders. So I like the fact that you speak about yes and as a method of, on the one hand, creating psychological safety, enabling everybody to, speak up, and in some way as a very fundamental collaborative tool. I think what's different about the way you speak of it in improv is just how present you require people to be. And I think that's a beautiful thing because, uh, being present of things for most of us, we're so busy living in the past or the future that simply to be present in any given situation and be able to give the people around us our complete undivided attention, that's a skill itself. So when we combine the intention of creating psychological safety on the one hand with the skill of being present and fully listening to what people are saying, I can totally see how that would be a winning combination. Before we take the questions, one small question I have for you: does this work as well virtually?
Yes.
It does.
Yes. So 10 years ago when we started bringing this virtual, you got to remember 10 years ago, it was little avatars, right? It was these little figures that like, this is going to replace on-site learning. So we're like, oh, we should get used to doing this. So that was a crap learn. Yet we learned a lot from experimenting both internally and externally. Then you cut to telepresence. Remember those big TVs were going to replace on-site learning. And so we were fortunate that we had leaders in that space and they invited us in and we're working with clients, internal, external, and that actually worked really well. The challenge was that the TVs are bulky, they're super expensive, the technology wasn't on point at that, and you still had to leave your office to go to these workspaces that had these giant TVs in it. So you replace on-site learning. A few years after that, though, you have all these different like Skype and FaceTime and multiple faces on them, and then these platforms start showing up, and you're able to really start putting things together. So through our approach, and this is specific, it's not improvisation as a whole, business improv specifically, it works really well because what we're focusing on, again, is that human connection, that people skills, which is all about connection, engagement, building trust with each other as well. And so I would say in our 10-year journey to get here and 3.5 years, almost 4 years of executing in this medium, we've certainly had our hiccups. We've certainly had mistakes. We've learned, we've experimented. And again, really using that model of divergent thinking, convergent thinking, postponing judgment. I mean, I've done a lot, I've created a book on this with the same thing, same methodology. And that's how we develop our exercises. So it's a lot of tweaking, it's a lot of tailoring, it's a lot of original work. And it's to get to that same foundational skill set that you can build on toward things like strategy, toward alignment, toward bringing people with you, because that's really, if you don't have a strong foundation on what are you building. So that's where we come in and help companies, help people, help teams, like lay that foundation really well. And that helps with that engagement. It helps with the presence. It helps with the agility. And all of this, again, linking IQ to EQ, then helps with things like morale and motivation and just drive. And that's super important right now as we continue to feel more and more isolated and look for opportunity to see the light at the end of this tunnel, which it's still a very long, very dark tunnel without a cure, without a vaccine, without clinical trials for these things. We're here. This is it. And if we're not planning for this now, the first 6-7 months of this is like leadership scramble. And that's how we're moving. Now, organizations and people should be thinking, well, what's going to happen in the next 6 months with my team? If we don't start working on this now, we'll have to work on it later, and then we're going to have to break and change this. So it absolutely, without question, works through the form.
No, I can see that. And I can see actually how it would become even more important because I think leading virtual teams is a skill of its own. It requires much more intentionality than, in-person meeting. So I'm just going to take a few comments. Dheeraj says, awesome, Bob. Hi, Dheeraj. Nice to see you here. Dheeraj is also a UCLA grad, so I don't know, maybe you met. Profoy says, success is on the other side of fear. You're a true example of that statement, Bob. Wonderful. Geeta says, reacting, adapting, communicating. Thank you so much, Geeta, for capturing that, because I thought I would, and then I wasn't quite sure what the first one was. I thought it was observing, so you got it just right. Narayan says some very good points there, Bob. I find it interesting how culture and self-confidence play such a key role in being able to express oneself clearly and effectively. Actually, let me ask you this. Do you require a lot of self-confidence to be good at improv, or is self-confidence sort of an outcome of being good at it?
Well, first, thank you for those comments and questions. And you develop confidence through practicing improvisation. So we work with an incredible amount of engineers, for example, a lot of scientists, a lot of people who are stereotypically, and not by us, people are saying, well, they're not going to be able to do this. They don't think that way. They're way more analytical. And the reality is, if you have to talk to people, then it's something that we have to work on and we have to get strong at. And so for two reasons, I'm going to go back to engineers and scientists. There's truth behind that stereotype, right? Is a lot of analytically thinking people who are introverted by nature, who would rather just put their head down and work than actually talk out. And that turns into self-fulfilling prophecy, that now there's a lack of comfort talking to people because they have more comfort working with their head down and their nose down than actually working with somebody else. And then the organization as well is like, well, they're those people. They're just not going to be able to do this. Once you start breaking this down, what it takes to really engage, really stay connected. And I keep mentioning the same things. It's focus, it's concentration, it's presence, it's reacting, adapting, communicating to slow the brain down, because that's super important as well, especially as it relates to emotion, it relates to fear. Slow down, take a deep breath, think slow to move fast. And that's a way to connect and engage with each other as well. And once you put those foundational blocks in place, all these people who are like, they're not going to do this, they're going to feel uncomfortable, start getting better and better and better. And before you know it, they're laughing, they're having fun, they're connecting with each other. What we hear quite often is, I thought I was going to hate this, and I don't. And in fact, I'm walking out of here really thinking I have techniques that I want to start using for myself. I want to develop as a leader. And that's the thing as well. A lot of people will get to a certain point through technical proficiencies and then will not get past that point because, again, leaders bring people along and they're good with the tech side. They just not good with the people side. So they stop. And it's only the people who are good with both, and then really start developing other people who will take their job on the tech side, who move on to senior leadership positions.
So, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. In fact, the words like executive presence, they've been used for a couple of decades at least. But what underlies it are perhaps some of the same skills, the ability to be in the moment, be focused, connect, communicate, react to what's actually happening, have your plans, but sort of don't be a slave to them either. Be able to adapt all of that with what's happening. So I can see that. I can see how it might become a virtuous cycle for some. So thank you for that. Sanjay says, Bob is almost speaking in person on Zoom, and there's a lot to learn as to how to engage an audience. His expressions and gestures make him catch attention. He quite like it. I think that's absolutely true, Sanjay. I mean, you certainly bring a lot of energy virtually as well. And then we have a comment that mindfulness is a key word for improv. So tell me more. Do you think, we tend to think of mindfulness as a spiritual practice, a way to sort of slow down and get into the present for another purpose, but not so much as, to get business done. Where does mindfulness really fit into business improv skills, and how does it help?
Well, thank you for the great comments about energy and presence, and I appreciate that, and the great comments around mindfulness. This is a great question, because if I can do a Venn diagram here, all right, we'll see if this actually there, that overlap is mindfulness and improvisation right there, okay? So it's huge. It's huge because improvisation only takes place in the moment. I mean, even great storytellers who are ad hoc storytellers or improvisational storytellers, they're still present in the moment. You know, their story might be the past. Their story might even be the future. However, the presentation of this is taking place in the moment, which is the thing that drives it. It's a compelling or dynamic storyteller that brings those stories to life, less than the stories itself. And that's what people witness, the moment. And that's the same with comedic improvisation, theatrical. Think of, you mentioned Whose Line Is It Anyway? TV show. You're watching that in the moment, and they're reacting to each other in the moment. They're adapting to each other in the moment. So what we've told a lot of people, and I've worked with a lot of thought leaders, global thought leaders in mindfulness, is that since what we're focusing on, all right, so the phrase, again, not my phrase that I came up with, however, a phrase that we've repurposed definitely in business improv, think slow to move fast. Think slow to move fast. And by using this type of phrase along with yes and really understanding impulses, you know, an impulsive behavior, that's more of a one-off, right? That's just such a fast reaction, and that's different than reacting. Reacting is ongoing. And so we're not saying that impulse of reaction, it's the reacting that makes it ongoing, slowing that impulse down, slowing your body down, slowing your mind down to feel those thought triggers, those impulse reactions, the emotions, and then recognizing in other people drives you to such a heightened state of presence that you can read nonverbal communication in a different way, even through this medium. You see subtext, you can pick up keys, clues, offers, gifts, whatever you want to call them, of nuanced changes in intonation and dynamics. And that's a high state of presence. And so doing business improv exercises directly links to an outcome of mindfulness. It's in the moment at a high level. And the one tweak that would probably be different, which in business improv, we call this a self-audit. Mindfulness is really about yourself, right? It's about recognizing your emotions, recognizing your state. That self-audit is that same recognition around mindfulness that's internal, and then pushing it out enough that you can see what's happening on the outside. Even through a computer screen, you can see what's resonating, what's not resonating. You know, I can look at your face and see thoughtfulness behind it. So I can either like start trying to trigger that a little bit or back off a little bit to give you some wiggle room to see how you're going to respond to this. And so this is a different state of mindfulness that now goes out toward other people for observation, which then links it directly toward emotional intelligence. So I think mindfulness and improvisation, everyone would agree, is just huge. It's a huge overlap, one over the other.
Wow. Wow, that's so interesting. And I love what you spoke about, think slow and, you know, to act fast. I think that's a very powerful way to think of it. When you spoke about what it meant to, you know, sort of slow down your thinking at any given time, what I'm understanding from how you're describing it is a lot to do with being able to observe what's happening around you very carefully.
Yes.
Is that's what you're referring to as part of the, you know, slow down, think slow to be able to respond better?
Yes. So the special forces, at least in America, have a phrase that is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And that's the same as think slow to move fast. In times of risk, uncertainty, crisis, a lot of movement taking place. It's the people who can slow the whole thing down, observe to the best of their ability, gain a strong level of awareness. It might not be accurate, yet you're trying to be as accurate as possible. Then receive information in from other people, adjusting in real time your perception of what's going on, and able to communicate out as well. Those are the people who typically rise in rank and status among other people as well. And that's the same thing that we're talking about, because in improvisation, if you think about improvisation at least as organically as possible, now stepping away from Whose Line Is It Anyway, which is great, again, paying it compliments, that's short form, it's structured, it can come with props, you know, all sorts of different things, pianos over on the side. Long form improvisation is organic. You are on stage with chairs, a blank stage and only chairs, and then the other performers. And that's it. That's all you have. And so with this, then even if you're focusing on some object work, something front and center that you're like, I'm going to make an egg, crack it open this way, whatever it might be, and you're focusing on making an omelet, you still have to look out. You have to cheat out, use your peripheral vision. You listen to key offers, sounds, clues, and you communicate with other people, and everything is created organically and in the moment, in real time. And if your brain is moving too rapidly where you think it should go or where you want it to go, then you're probably going to railroad other people or steamroll other people. There's probably going to be a point that you're a ball hog and you're not sharing with other people. And there's an incredibly high probability that you're missing what they're saying. And it's not just the words, which words are gold. So when you have nothing, those words become super, super important. And that's slowing the brain down to hear them. You're missing the physicality, the nonverbal communication. You're missing the subtext. And on a stage, that could be significant because one person could actually, with physicality, create like this beautiful table of objects, right? It's invisible. And if you're not paying attention to it and you walk right through it, that audience is they're going to turn. Like, no. Created this beautiful reality, and you, dummy, just walk through it. And you're like, ugh. So it's a skill set to slow the brain down as well, because in that moment, people become important. Words become important. Nonverbal communication becomes important.
Yeah. It's really, I mean, there's so much food for thought there. Akash says really useful session. Vijay says awesome thought process. Praloy, he has a question. How does one deal with ego in the corporate world? Ask the question as we are discussing how important it is to communicate with people. What do you think?
So ego exists, right? Biases exist across the board. And sometimes we recognize our biases and sometimes we do not recognize them at all. And we see the world through our own rose-colored glasses or whatever the tint makes us unique. You know, the uniqueness of us as individuals is the way that we see the world, and that is valuable. That's perspective, and that perspective is so important. And there are times that can evolve into ego, and that can put people off. So when creating this psychologically safe space that we've mentioned a couple of times, wherein we're postponing judgment, we're using yes and to communicate with each other, we're really present and in the moment at a high level, status doesn't matter anymore. Rank does not matter anymore. And ego does not matter anymore. So what we're doing is leveling the playing field across the board. And that's super important because what we're talking about is creating a build-in culture, a culture in which people want to participate. They want to bring blocks to the building, the structure, the foundation. They want to help lay the rebar. I don't know how far I'm going to go with this metaphor of foundation. However, if one person is doing it, that ego, and I mentioned before a ball hog, that could be a form of ego, right? Where somebody just doesn't want to share. They just don't want to pass it. And that doesn't have a strong place. It doesn't have a great place inside of a really high functioning team, whether it's an on-site team or a virtual team. That's got to be tempered. And I would roll the dice to say that a lot of people do not understand that that's how they come across. So they're missing a high level of mindfulness or awareness, self-audit to know that that's how they're affecting other people. And so creating that psychologically safe space is the opportunity as well to have difficult conversations, to manage conflict. And you can use yes and for both of those two things. And I'll shine a huge light on managing conflict. Building a joint problem solving solution as a great example as a way to use yes and in that psychologically safe space to take somebody who might have a lot of ego and a lot of attitude and temper her or his behavior to elevate other people.
You know, when you speak about places where you can use some of the principles, I found it really interesting that in your book, you've applied it to personal branding.
Yes.
Do you want to speak a little bit about how some of these principles can help in personal branding? I mean, it's been a subject of much focus for the last several years, and I think many LinkedIn users are conscious, at least somewhat, of the personal brand they're creating. So how can one use business improv principles for that?
Okay, so I love that. I love this comment because especially as it relates to online presence, you know, so we'll start right here. There are certain things that we can do to set ourselves up for success. So I'll start there and I'll circle back around to it because What I want to shine a light on, the way that we look at personal brand, it's the way you comport yourself on a day-to-day basis, and most accurately, the way people perceive you. That's truly your brand. So you can create what you want people to see, and you can think what you know people see, right? I think people are seeing this side of me. The only way to find out what people actually see is to ask them. And that takes vulnerability. It takes humility that you might not be doing it correctly. And if you're truly in that growth, Carol DeWitt growth mindset, that ability to learn from that as well. And so like, okay, I'm not the leader. I'm not the team player that I thought I was. My brand is ego. I'll go back to what was said before, or ball hog. And I don't want that as my brand. I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity now through this medium to be a better team player, better communicator, better leader. And so with this, then it's all about the opportunity and the ability to recognize what you're doing in real time. Let's go back to the key concepts and then do something about it. So for us in this reality, just to give a quick hint, we look at how to set ourselves up for success. What are we doing? And then simple concepts like energy. Energy can make a difference. What you bring to the table, attitude, a little smile versus a frown. And that can affect not only the way that it can affect other people, period. It can affect, though, the way that people look at you. So your brand, and it can affect your messaging as well. So simple things, especially in combination with yes and, can make a big difference in the way your brand is perceived. It's got to come from that awareness, though, that we've talked about many times, linked to mindfulness, linked to the self-audit. And with that awareness comes humility. It just comes to understand that I might not be creating the brand that I want to if everybody I ask is telling me something different than what I think I did. Not, can everybody be wrong? Maybe it could be you shine that light on yourself and like, okay, I got to tweak something.
I love that because you're approaching personal branding as much from how am I being received, how are others connecting with me, and using your skills of being in the present moment and being a good observer of responses around you to gauge some of that. So I love that. I also love, I think in the book you speak about self-audit and how that can play a role. Could you just say a little bit about that? Because I thought that was a very intriguing idea.
Yeah, that self-audit as it relates to mindfulness, as well as it relates to controlling your brand, is super important. So once again, a self-audit is a high state of awareness. It's focus, it's concentration, it's presence in the moment, and it's recognition of what's going on with that vulnerability that you might not be on point, so you have to make tweaks. And so this then relates to branding in so much that if you're really aware of your own behavior and how you're influencing other people, so how people are responding to you, not necessarily where you want to go as much as how they're actually responding to you, then you can make both micro or macro adjustments to really get that person on the other side to shift, to pivot, to align toward the future, so you can get them where you want to go through that self-audit of high state of awareness, high state of presence, and then that ability to recognize honestly in real time what's happening outside to make those adjustments.
I think at the core of it all seems to come down to this heightened sense of awareness and focus in the present. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's certainly a worthwhile thing for all of us to develop, me certainly. Sanjay says, Bob has taught us a new skill with the way we can present our thoughts. Call it VQ, virtual quotient, skill beyond IQ and EQ. That's a nice one. Great to listen and watch. I can't wait to read your book. It's a really interesting book, and I can tell you, Sanjay, that when we started off, and I think you speak about in your book, right? This example of when you taught this program at the first time at Duke with senior execs, they were like, "How does this possibly connect with anything we do?" And to be honest, I also wasn't quite sure. But when I read it, I thought, oh, maybe this is one of the big sort of skill sets that I'm missing, because I think it could really go a long way in helping all of us, and me certainly, develop a much better way of responding to any situation as it sort of emerges. That heightened observation, and I love the idea of heightened observation, heightened focus and presence along with slowing down, because they almost seem contradictory, but I can sort of see how they would, come together. So yeah, that was really interesting. Praloy, thank you for the amazing inputs. So one last question, because I know that we're coming at the end of our time. You speak about how business improv principles are great for interacting with millennials.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit more to how that might be the case?
Absolutely. So one of the challenges that we've seen over and over again, and for at least audiences that we're facing quite often, it's baby boomers down to millennials. It's not really the Gen X folks who are like, I don't know how to talk to millennials, because we're kind of caught in the middle. My group is like, we're talking to both sides. So I think that swing allows us to have a better understanding on how to do it. So it's that generational gap. And the way that I equate this is it's still talking. That's what we're doing. We're still just communicating. So everybody needs to be flexible. The baby boomers need to understand technology in a different way and understand why that's an important way for at least some millennials to communicate. It's also important, though, to understand that the mind shift is different from millennials than it was to baby boomers. And it should be. I mean, just think about the differences in decades from the first baby boomers to the first millennials, and even what's happening now as well. So there is a difference in the way that we communicate with each other, and baby boomers have to bend and millennials have to bend. Millennials come in and just demand that everything goes their way and they see a better way. And if it doesn't work, we're just going to jump this gig and go to another gig, which is a very strong trend for millennials to like, they're going to have a lot of jobs early on before they find the one that they really want to sink their teeth into. And that's fair. That's something that senior leadership has to understand. At the same time, millennials need to understand that there is a different way to communicate, and it doesn't make it a wrong way to communicate, and it doesn't make it outdated as a way to communicate. It just means there's difference. And so when you take one group and ask them to bend a little bit, and you take another group and ask them to bend a little bit, what we find is that there's this area in the middle. And that's what we focus on, that area in the middle. And this is exactly how we teach internationally as well. I mentioned that I had the privilege of coming to Mumbai a few years ago, and I've been to Dubai, I've been to Singapore, I've traveled the world several times over, and working with different cultures, Germany, Russian audiences, everybody's got a different style. And so we ask the same exact thing that we would ask between baby boomers and millennials. You bend a little bit, we'll bend a little bit, and then let's find that place where we really all exist in the moment with each other. And that's where it's going to take root. And that's where the grassroots are going to take hold.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I can just about visualize how, great presence in the moment, along with suspending judgment and creating that space for genuine communication, might be the answer to people with all sorts of differences being able to, because I think one of the biggest challenges with conversations with people who, for whatever reason you've attached a label to, whether it's generational or whether it's a set of beliefs or anything else, is that your past ideas come in the way of truly listening to what is being spoken in the moment. So I thought that was a really interesting example. So let me then ask you, Bob, I realize we're coming to an end of our conversation today. Are these skills really skills that can be broken down and sort of learned systematically?
Yes. Yes.
And you teach them?
Yes, definitely. We teach them you mentioned. We have a program for Wharton tomorrow night. We had a program for Duke Fuqua a couple of days ago, all virtual, all 100% virtual, because keep in mind the skill set we're focusing on: focus, concentration, presence, the ability to postpone judgment, which is super hard for a lot of people to get to, especially if you're really driven, you're really confident, you already know the answer, and somebody comes to you with an idea, and in your head, like, we tried that already, it doesn't work, and you want to say no. There's an opportunity there to put your arm around somebody and say, okay, walk me through why this is important to you. Walk me through why you think this is going to work, as opposed to just popping that no, which for a lot of people is a default. And so the ability to just bulk up that skill set around postponing judgment is so important to building those strong relationships. And that's really what we're focusing on. And whether you're really a master at building relationships or novice at it, and through this medium, it's something we can all learn, we can all get better at, and we will consistently be challenged in the future, both through technology and distance and the longevity of this, which is going to, trigger different emotions in us. It's going to burn our endurance down, and it's going to force us into stress behaviors. And these stress behaviors are going to amplify. And so to say that really what worked on site is going to work really well virtually, to your point before, dismisses the fact that we're not on site. It's a different reality altogether. And so to get good at this should be a lifelong quest. It should be, a life learner to say, like, I'm going to continue to get better at this over and over again, because if nothing else, my team's going to shift. I'm going to grow. We're all going to find new challenges, and what can we learn from it?
Oh, and I'm actually heartened to know that there's a path to learning some of these skills. And I'm going to request that maybe after our conversation, if you send me a link, I'm going to post it so that just in case somebody is interested in joining one of your programs, at least they know where to get it. Because I think it's a lot of people who would have heard our conversation today, and certainly me, it seems very clear that this is a set of skills that can serve us well, be it from the perspective of becoming a better leader and creating better spaces for our team members, but also from being a better participant in almost any situation, be it a situation at work or even outside of work. So it's really helpful to think that there are steps, or there's a process to developing some of these skills, and if you don't have it at this point in time, one can develop it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can develop it. And we have an online program if people are interested in just doing an async program, play as they go. It's called Improvisational Communication. It's on Teachable, and it's exactly what you were mentioning. It's for personal and professional development using these tools and techniques with the outcome of communication, collaboration, creativity, dealing with change, dealing with conflict, creating a culture. And it will work virtually just as well as it will work on site, because it's all about what are you doing? How are you affecting other people? How are you growing? And that's improvisational communication. And that is that skill set that you're talking about, bulking up and learning, developing authentically. That's right there.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I can honestly say I learned a lot.
I hope everyone out there stays safe and stay positive, and look forward to seeing some of you around LinkedIn or wherever we might meet one day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I said, do send me a link. I'm going to post it on the event page, and of course, if you post it on yours, maybe some of our LinkedIn viewers can follow you as well.
Awesome. I will, definitely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we're at the end of our show today. I hope you learned as much as I did. Honestly, for me, now that's a new suite of skills that I want to actually focus on and learn myself. I think I can see so many situations where I know I personally would be more effective if I had the ability to, be a better observer of all that's happening around me, and maybe adapt my responses to tailor that situation more precisely. So that's certainly on my learning agenda. For those of you who were with us through the show, if you want to watch a replay, it'll be available on my LinkedIn page right after. And of course, if you like it and want to share it with any of your friends, feel free to like, comment, share on your wall. A copy of this will be available on Uncube's website by Monday. And do join us next week. In fact, continuing our conversations around where the future is headed, we have a very, very special guest coming up, Mr. Krish Shankar, who's the Group Head of HR of Infosys. And as some of you might know, he's the president of the National HRD Network and a big luminary in the field of HR. And he's going to come on to speak about the future of HR. And our next conversation will be Friday at noon. So that's November 6th at noon. Do join us right there. And with that, we come to an end of today's conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. And do stay tuned and join us on all our future conversations. With that, bye.